Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blogging Theology. And today I'm delighted to welcome back Shaykh Hamza Karamali. You're most welcome, sir. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for having me again. It's always a pleasure.
It's great to have you back. And you're in Istanbul, I think, and I'm in cold, rainy London. So
Yep,
I'm very
beautiful
envious.
Istanbul.
Yeah,
The beautiful Bosphorus.
yes, a lovely city. Lovely city. Hamza, for those who don't remember, is a traditionally trained theologian who specializes in arguments for the existence of God and the truth of Islam. He is the founder of Why Islam is True, an online course, a textbook, and teacher training program that has trained 500 teachers in 19 different countries. And you can learn about Hamza and his work by visiting his website, hamzakaramali.com, and I'll put the link in the description below. Hamza is releasing a series called God's Cosmos, which is about the Big Bang, modern cosmology, and arguments for the existence of God. And you can find the series on Basira Education YouTube channel, and I'll link to that in the description below. The first 6 episodes are out, and about 10 more are on the way. And I've seen a couple of them, and they're very high quality, I must say, quite impressive. This conversation is inspired by his 2 most recent episodes, in which he gave a nuanced interpretation of Quranic verses in light of our modern scientific knowledge of the universe. He responded to the common objection that if Quranic verses had science in them, then how would the ancient Arabians have understood them in that way? And also to the objection that Muslims who read science into the Quran are cherry-picking certain interpretations. You can find links to both of these videos as well in the description below. His videos have opened up old discussions about the topic of the scientific miracle of the Quran, and he gives a new perspective, which is actually very interesting and nuanced, as I say. So what are your thoughts on the scientific miracle of the Quran?
So when I was a teenager, it was all over the internet. It was the thing. All Muslims were talking about it. When I was in high school, I had some Christian friends. I shared it with them. And I used to mention the scientific miracle as part of the reasons why they should become Muslim. And I remember Dr. Zakir Naik, very intelligent scholar from India. He used to have many videos about this. And there was a lot of literature produced in Saudi Arabia that was translated into English, distributed all over the world. I read a lot of it. But today, when I look back at all of that, I think it was a good first step. But we need to revisit those videos. We need to revisit those articles and books and develop a more nuanced expression of the idea of science in the Quran. There have been many refutations of these videos and books by Christian missionaries, and they've made some good points that we need to take into consideration when we're talking about science in the Quran. And they've also made many mistakes that we need to respond to. And that's what I've been doing in the video series that you've mentioned.
So I think one of the common responses to claims of the scientific miracle of the Quran is that the Quran is meant to be a spiritual book, not a science textbook, and that claims that certain verses are talking about science ruin the spiritual intent of the book. Is that a good point?
Yeah, I think it is a good point because the Quran is a spiritual book. It is meant to evoke slavehood to God, gratitude to God, fear of God, worship of God, love of God. And it's not meant to be like E equals MC squared. It's not a scientific textbook. And the interpretation of any verse of the Quran, it needs to preserve that spiritual intent of the Quran. But the Quran, it makes reference to the universe. It talks about the sun, the moon, the earth, the stars, the plants, animals, growth of human beings. And whenever it talks about the universe, something in the universe, and many of these descriptions, they are very detailed descriptions, then in order to understand those verses, anyone who reads those verses is going to bring their understanding of what those things in the universe are. So it's just, so if, and our understanding of those verses doesn't just depend on the words in the Quran, but it also depends on what we think the universe to be. So we have to deal with our scientific understanding of the universe, and we have to bring it into our understanding of the Quran. There's always going to be an interplay between science, our understanding of the universe, and these verses of the Quran. And it's nothing new, because all of the classical scholars of tafsir, they used to bring the science of their time into their interpretation of the Quran. And they lived in a time when the prevailing scientific worldview was Aristotelian, and they brought it into their interpretation of the Quran, and they did it in a way that preserved the spiritual intent of the verse. So let me give an example. So if we look at this verse, this is from Surah Yasin, a surah that many Muslims we recite. It's called the heart of the Quran. And in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about the sun and the moon and the night and the day. And He says that the sun doesn't overtake the moon. So when I look up at the sky, I see the sun rising from the east and setting in the west, and then it becomes night. And then I see the moon rising, and I see the moon setting, and then it becomes day, and I see the sun rising, and I see the sun setting, and then it becomes night, and it keeps on going on, and neither one overtakes the other. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار. And nor does the night outstrip the day. You have night, day, they come after one another. And then the verse, it says, كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. All of them, the sun, the moon, the night, the day, they literally, the word sabaha means to swim. They swim in a falak. So the word falak in the ancient Arabic language, it has to do with circles. So Razi, in his tafsir, Fakhruddin al-Razi is known to bring a lot of the science of his time into his tafsir. He was an expert in falsafa. Falsafa is mistranslated now as philosophy. It's not philosophy, but it is the understanding of the universe, Neoplatonist understanding of the universe that the Muslims inherited from the Christians. They Islamized it. There were some theological debates, but they conceived of the universe in a particular way, and they used to talk about celestial spheres, and the word that they used for the word celestial sphere was falak, which is the same word as is found in the Quran here. So Aristotle, he looked at the night sky, and he saw that the sun moves, the moon moves, the stars move, the planets move, and they were all, as far as he was concerned, they were things in the sky. So he explained their movements by positing the existence of transparent spheres that surrounded the earth. Earth is in the middle, you have a sphere, you have another sphere, and you have another sphere. And these celestial bodies, they are implanted in these spheres, and these spheres, they move. And so the many Muslims, they inherited this, and that's the way that they used to look at the universe. So here, where it says that all of them, they swim in their falak, Fakhruddin al-Razi, he says that the word falak in the Arabic language, it comes from an instrument. I think it's a spindle that they used for weaving, and it has a circle at the top of it, and it's called a falaka. That thing at the top is called a falaka. And there was something on the roof of a tent in the ancient Arabians. Many of them were Bedouins. So where they made tents, and they had this circular thing on the roof they called a falaka. So he said that the word falak, based on this and based on his understanding of the ancient Arabian language, he said it can mean one of three things. He said it can mean a circular path, it's called a da'ira, meaning a one-dimensional circle, or it can mean a circular shape, which is like a two-dimensional shape, or it can mean a sphere, which is like the Aristotelian celestial sphere. And so he's saying that they're swimming in a falak. They're swimming in a falak. And then he has a discussion in his tafsir, and he talks about another understanding of the universe that used to be prevalent at that time. There were some Muslims who believed, not based on their Islam, but just the science of the time, that the sky, the heaven, is like flat. It's like flat extension. But if there are celestial spheres, it's not flat extension. It's like a dome almost, but it's a dome that goes around. So he brings a series of arguments, and they're all scientific arguments, Aristotelian scientific arguments, to show that the heaven is dome-shaped. Like you see a dome-shaped. In other words, he's showing it's like a sphere, which is consistent with Aristotelian conceptions of the universe. So now what I guess the thing that I'm illustrating here, the point of this illustration is that Razi and the other Mufassirun, Baydawi does this too. Baydawi is the most influential scholar of tafsir in the history of Islam. His tafsir is studied in seminaries for hundreds of years. It's been like the most important book of tafsir studied in Muslim seminaries. And they're early. They lived hundreds of years ago. So they have a scientific understanding of how these objects move. And so then when they come to the Qur'an, they understand the Qur'an to be referring to these things that they think the universe is. And then they enter into a discussion, and there's a reconciliation, and they do all of these things. And so the way in which they're doing it, it doesn't undermine the spiritual intent of the verse. Because right. The spiritual intent of the verse here in Surah Yasin, the verses before it, is to show the design and order and complexity in the universe, to show that God has knowledge and he runs everything with a purpose. And then the higher goal of these verses, if you go a bit higher, is that therefore there's going to be a resurrection, because God is able to resurrect, and just as he has a grand plan for everything else in the universe, he has a grand plan for human beings too. So it makes sense for there to be a resurrection. There's something like this, and so although he is entering into a scientific analysis of the word falak, it's just a natural part of understanding what the verse is. So it's always been done, and it doesn't undermine the spiritual intent of the verse. And just as it was done then, we would do it in the same way now. I think there's one thing that I want us to take away from this, a side point, which is that Razi did this, Baydawi did this, many classical scholars did this, but if you look at the works of the scholars of tafsir, you don't find their opponents, for example, saying that you can't do this because if this is what the verse would have meant, then the companions would have given the same meaning. You don't find that objection. You find other objections. They'll say that the science doesn't give you certain knowledge, and the knowledge of the Qur'an, the scriptural knowledge, revealed knowledge, is stronger than the science, and there's a linguistic analysis versus like the scientific knowledge. You find that, but they don't say that the companions would have known this. And the reason why they don't say this, I think this is really important, is that the Qur'an contains two kinds of verses. The first kind of verse is a verse that has to do with action and practice. So there's verses about inheritance, detailed descriptions of how inheritance should be distributed in Surah An-Nisa, the fourth chapter of the Quran. There's verses about marriage and divorce. There's some verses about prayer. There's verses about zakat. There's verses about fasting. And these verses that have to do with action, the scholars of tafsir and the scholars of Islamic law, sacred law, they studied these verses to death. And the companions had a position on this, because these verses are related to our moral responsibility before God. And so when Muslims came, these were the verses that they focused on. There are other verses which, from the earliest of times, many Muslims, they said, I'm not sure what it means. So, for example, there are verses about the throne of God. And the throne of God, there's an old theological debate about whether it should be figuratively interpreted. That's one position. And another position is, they said that I'm not, I affirm God's transcendence, and I'm not sure what it means. And it's okay. I believe in it in the meaning that God intended. I accept it. This is revelation. But I believe in it in the meaning that God intended without specifying a meaning. And so what that shows is that there are verses from the earliest of times that Muslims, they accepted. They were fine with the fact that I'm not sure what it means. And the verses to do with the universe, such as the heavens and what's the nature of the heavens and these details, they were left. There was an openness in them. So they accepted that, I might not understand this, but maybe one day people will. And it's from the creator of the universe. So, and he knows more about the universe than I do. So I'll it means something to me now. I'll take what it means. I'll practice. I'll worship. And maybe in the future, we'll discover more about it. And so when in the time of Razi, hundreds of years after the companions, he's doing this, it was normal, right? And so this is a phenomenon. This phenomenon of scientific interpretation, it's existed. And it's important for us to understand how it existed, how people responded to it, and then use that in our times.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I can see how they used to bring in Aristotelian science in the past. Can you give an example of how modern science might be used?
Yeah. So in the example that I just used, in the word falak, over here, I think if we, in light of modern science, falak would be an orbit, which is also one of the meanings that that Razi gave. And so, and that's how many contemporary Qur'an translations, they translate this verse. But a more interesting example is Surah 7, verse 54, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that he يُغْشِي اللَّيْلَ النَّهَارَ يَطْلُبُهُ حَثِيثًا. So I have my own translations because I have my own translations because the prevalent translations, they don't do justice to the rhetorical intent of the verse. And so as I unpack the meaning, you'll see why I translated it in this way. It's a little bit clunky. The English is a little bit clunky. But I want my focus is to bring out the meaning of the Arabic. So the sentence, it says, يُغْشِي اللَّيْلَ النَّهَارَ, which means that he, i.e. Allah, covers the day with the night, or it can mean he covers the night with the day. Because it takes, both of them are objects. So in English, you have verbs that take an indirect object and a direct object. So you say, John gave Mark money. So there's two objects, because Mark is the object of giving, and the money is also the object of giving. There's an indirect and a direct object. In English, they have to have a particular order. In Arabic, you can switch the order. And so both the night and the day in this sentence, they're both objects. And since the time of Baydawi, which was hundreds of years ago, scholars, they said that it means both. Although night and day is mentioned only once, this linguistic possibility, the meaning is intended that both covers the night with the day and the day with the night. There's actually another verse in the Quran where it said explicitly, it says, Allah says that He wraps the night around the day and He wraps the day around the night. Yukawiru layla ala nahar wa yukawiru nahara ala layl. Over there it's said explicitly. Over here it's not said explicitly because it doesn't need to be said, because of this phenomenon of having two objects, the night and the day. So in previous times, how did they understand this? They understood this by it's night. So it's dark. It's dark. And then there's dawn and the day begins to come. And so the night gets it starts fading away, and then the day gets brighter and it reaches its brightest, and now it's covered over the night. So the day has covered the night. In other words, it's caused it to disappear. And then at the evening time, it gets closer to sunset or after sunset, then the night starts to creep in, the light starts to disappear until eventually the day disappears, it becomes pitch black, and the night covers the day. So in Baydawi's time, this is how he said that I observed this happening. The night covers the day and the day covers the night, and they both cover each other. And then there's another part of this which is important. It says the night covers the day covers the night. And then it says yatlubuhu hasithan. Talaba means to chase after something, to seek something, to chase after it. And hasith means I have here hasith is when something is in a hurry, when it's pushed along. Something has made it rush. So you're pushing something, you're saying hurry, 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 hurry. And so the thing that you're hurrying is hasith. So what this verse is saying is that the day covers the night covers the day, and the thing that is doing the covering is chasing after the thing that it's covering in a way that it's being rushed by something else. Hadith in Arabic, it means over here the passive participle. And so this is the literal meaning of the surah. And it's really amazing because now when I today I understand day and night, and I look at the earth from space. And so the earth is, there's a small picture here, the earth is rotating. And as it rotates, you see, you get the day and night. But you can look at, what you can do is you can either have the earth rotating, and if the earth is rotating, then the night and day are still, or you can have the earth still, and then you see the day or night moving. You can look at it in both ways. So if you look at it, if you look at it as just like a, I guess if you had a satellite, they have these satellites that are focused on one point in space, one point on Earth. It's just like it revolves around that thing. So if you look from that satellite, then what you're going to see is you're going to see the day and the night moving, and you're going to see the day covering the night, covering the day on one end, and you're going to see on the other side the day covering the night, and each one is following the other while being rushed, right? And so it's like a dog chasing its tail. So
I know what you mean.
It's really quite remarkable. So where does this come from? Where this comes from is that I today understand the science of the day and night. And so I come to this verse, and I'm a Muslim, so I'm not doing apologetics here, right? I'm just trying to I'm a believing Muslim. I'm coming to this verse, and I believe it's from God, and I'm bringing my science to the table because the verse is talking about something that I have a scientific understanding of. And I look at it and I say, wow. And it is actually this meaning, it fits the higher level spiritual intent, because the intent of the verse is to show that God is in complete control of everything and he's running everything. And actually, like if you look at it from a linguistic perspective, that second part of this verse, which is that it chases it while being rushed, that linguistic meaning comes out more powerfully in light of my scientific understanding today. And that is what leads me to believe that this is the meaning that was intended. It's actually being said more strongly.
Mm-hmm.
So the power, the linguistic meaning is stronger, and it's also a more powerful expression of God being in control because it's a more detailed description, a detailed and accurate description of what is going on, and that he's controlling it. So so this is an example of me or somebody. It's not my interpretation, like many others have interpreted it. I've done a little bit more of like a linguistic analysis than others do, but this is an example of me bringing us bringing our scientific understanding into an interpretation of a Quranic verse today.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. And I do like the way, the nuanced way in which you interpreted the verse, because the verse then had a meaning for the Bedouin who read it at the time of the Prophet, upon him be peace. And it also has a meaning for the scientist who reads it today. And that's quite a nice response to the objection that some people have, that in order to read science into the Quran, the Bedouins would have had to understand it in the way that we do today. So I think that's nice, actually, very, very nice, nuanced explanation. So that's good.
Yeah. So that's an important point, and that actually brings me to the next verse. So regarding that point, I think there's one point. There's one thing that I already said, which is that it may be that the Bedouin doesn't know what the verse means completely, and that's okay, and you can kind of discover it later on. So it's not a condition that the Bedouin have the complete scientific understanding, but it has to mean something for the Bedouin. But sometimes it's possible that the Bedouin doesn't understand, and that's what this verse illustrates. This is a really really amazing verse. So I have one of the episodes in the God's Cosmos is about this verse. And so this verse, it's in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, and that's a surah that's again a frequently recited surah, and it says in this verse, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala he swears an oath. He says, "Fala uqsimu bimawaqi'in nujum." I swear by the positions of the stars. I swear by the positions of the stars. So the oaths are something that are frequently mentioned in the Quran, and oaths and emphasis, surely, verily. These are things that are very commonly used in the Quran. They used to be part of the linguistic culture of the ancient Arabians. They're not that common anymore. So often you can't really relate to them.
Sorry, I'm going to pause you there for the viewers who are wondering what's going on here. I've heard this. I heard you explain this before in a video you did recently, and I've never heard this discussed before. And I think it is a very interesting, remarkable explanation that you give. So I encourage viewers to stay the course and just hear and observe and comprehend what Shaykh Hamza is doing here, because this is a very interesting ayah indeed. And it discloses great scientific marvels, actually, without any, as far as I can see, twisting or forcing something to mean something, or any kind of eisegesis rather than exegesis, to use a term in hermeneutics. So I would encourage people just to pay close attention to what Shaykh Hamza is saying here, because it will disclose some very remarkable properties of this ayah. So that was my little advert for you there. I just wanted to encourage people to stay with this and to try and grasp what you're saying, which is not difficult to understand, but I think it's very significant.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really exciting. So the language is just amazing. So it's swearing an oath. right? So when you swear an oath, the purpose of swearing an oath is that you're emphasizing the truth of a statement that you're making, and you're saying that for me to not speak the truth is a really grave matter, and you do that by swearing an oath by something that is seen as grave and tremendous by both sides. So if I were to like swear an oath by a grain of sand, pick up a grain of sand and I say, Paul, I swear by this grain of sand that I'll do such and such.
I will be underwhelmed. I'm truly underwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah. So why? Because it's not significant. So an oath is it's powerful when it's sworn by something tremendous. That's why when we swear an oath by God, and God is the most tremendous being, it means something. Now, when God swears an oath, he swears oaths by things and that we see are tremendous, or things that he wants to tell us are tremendous. So here he's swearing an oath by the positions of the stars. And so that means that that the positions of the stars are something that's really tremendous.
Yeah.
فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ. And that's like, it's what the language is saying. Then it says, فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ وَإِنَّهُ لَقَسَمٌ لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عَظِيمٌ. It emphasizes it. You already know that the oath, that the positions of the stars are something that are tremendous. And then it emphasizes that really it's tremendous. This is a parenthetical statement. It says, وَإِنَّهُ لَقَسَمٌ. Verily, it's a tremendous oath. And inside this parenthesis, there's another parenthesis, which is لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ, if only you knew. In other words, he's saying that I'm swearing an oath. It's really tremendous, really, really, really tremendous. And you don't know how tremendous it is. And he's saying this to the Bedouin, right?
Yeah.
So here it's telling the Bedouin that there's something that I'm talking about whose tremendousness you don't understand, and if only you knew it, right? So then it swears by the mawaqi' an-nujum, by the positions of the stars. So it's interesting that now I bring astronomer. I come here, I look at this, and I say, like, what is this? Stars? Well, I know a lot more about stars now than people did 1,500 years ago. And just in the last 100 years, our knowledge of the stars has it's increased so much, and it's revealed something that all of us find amazing. So when I look at stars, they are really far away. So the closest star is like 4 light years away. That means that it's so far that it takes light 4 years to reach me. And that means that I am looking at how the star used to be 4 years ago. And there's other stars that are millions of light years away. There's other stars that are billions of light years away. So NASA right now is exploring this area called deep space, which is billions and billions of light years away. And it's very close to the Big Bang. So you're actually looking back in time how galaxies used to be close to the Big Bang. And you can see it now. And that's really amazing. So now what this means is that when I'm looking at these stars that are billions of light years away, many of them, maybe they don't even exist anymore. Maybe there's been a supernova explosion and they're not there, but I'm looking at them. And they're also, so they may exist, they may not exist, and they're also moving. Stars are, everything in the universe is in orbit around something else. It's moving in a circular path, which is interesting, like Falak that we saw, which has kullun fi falakin yasbahun. All of them are swimming in orbits. And just like astronauts, when they practice to when they practice on Earth to be weightless in space, they actually go into water, because being in water is the closest experience that you have to being weightless. So swimming it's interesting. Like, like it's just an interesting thing, So that interesting word in the Quran. But coming back here, the Fala uqsimu biwaqi', I swear by the positions of the stars, because where I am, the star that I'm looking at right now, it's not there anymore. It's moved. So Fala uqsimu biwaqi'i an-nujum, and it's far away. And the word waqa'a, it's not just a position, but in the ancient Arabic language, it also means to fall. And stars are, when something is in orbit, it's actually falling. So when the way that you put a satellite in orbit around space is you put it at such, you propel it at such a speed that it falls and it keeps missing the Earth. And so you actually, it's a constant fall, call it free fall. So stars are actually falling, and waqa' means to fall. It also means to fall from a high place. Birds, they perch onto high mountains. So when I take this and I look at this verse, and I look at this oath, then it's like it's telling me something tremendous. I'm discovering something of the tremendousness of it, and the Bedouin then didn't know, and I do know, and that's what the verse is saying, and it's very nice. Yeah.
No, it is remarkable, I must say, and it's great. Is this your own discovery, or is this something you're just amplifying and investigating more closely with the language and so on?
These have been mentioned by other scholars. It's common in Arabic, but the rhetorical implications and everything, that's some of them. They're just.
It's your work. Excellent. Well done.
It's actually like when you. I guess the point is that when you learn the ancient Arabic language, then anyone who reads it can see it. And I think like that's what. So what I think what I want people to understand is not that like I've done excellent work or something, but I want people to understand is that if you can actually learn the Arabic language, you can learn the Arabic language, and then it's just like naturally there. It's for you to see. So when these discussions of science in the Quran, when they happen in the English language, then the people who are the Muslims, Muslim Muslims who are making these arguments, they don't understand it. So they're just going to one translation, another translation, and they're just taking something, and there's so much that gets lost. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, another objection then, moving on, perhaps, that people have to reading the science into the Quran is that there are many different interpretations of science, the different understandings of natural phenomena, and that when we read science into it, we're arbitrarily picking just one interpretation. So how do you answer that?
Yeah. So that's actually related to what we just talked about, which is that when you look at any verse, every verse has multiple interpretations. Most verses have multiple interpretations.
Sure.
Like this verse. I'm going to give you some interpretations for this verse. And you'll find these multiple interpretations in the books of tafsir. But when Muslims, they're engaged in like science, Qur'an discourse, they pick one of these interpretations and they say, look, it fits with the science, but they ignore the rest. And so a common objection is they say that, well, you're just arbitrarily choosing one. And in order for you to make the claim that this was the scientific meaning was intended, then you're only justified in making that claim if there's only one interpretive possibility that was posited by the scholars of tafsir. So I think so, and that's where the objection that you said is coming from. So that objection is not correct, because when the scholars of tafsir, they gave multiple possibilities, if you understand why they gave each possibility, you understand the language behind it, then you can actually, in light of your scientific knowledge today, you can prefer one, in light of the scientific knowledge and in light of the linguistic intent and the rhetorical intent of the verse, you can be convinced that the scientific meaning was intended. Right? So I'm going to illustrate it with this verse. So this verse, so the last episode in the God's Cosmos that just released, this verse, it says, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ وَالْأَرْضَ فَرَشْنَاهَا فَنِعْمَ الْمَاهِدُونَ. It goes on. Very, very beautiful verses. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he talks about the sama, which is the heavens. And he says that we built the heavens. It's the royal we. And the royal we is used for majesty when the thing that is being described, it shows the majesty of God. So over here, the heavens are something that there's something over there that shows the majesty of God. Now, the most obvious thing is that they're really big, they're really tremendous, and that came from the verse that we just saw a little while ago about the mawaqi' an-nujum. There's going to be something else here too, just going to fit with that. وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ. Aid means power, with tremendous power. We've made the heavens with tremendous power. So something so huge and tremendous requires a being that is extremely powerful. وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. And verily we are musi'un. So I've translated it here as we are expanding it. So this interpretation, Baydawi, he gave a number of interpretations. And one of the interpretations was expansion. But it wasn't the same expansion that I'm going to mention here. And I'm going to explain why. So he gave the interpretation that the first interpretation that he gave was inna lamusi'un, means we are powerful. Inna lamusi'un. So we made the heaven with great power, and surely we are powerful. Musi'un, we are powerful, we are able. And many scholars of tafsir, they mention that interpretation. Another interpretation that they mention is it has to do with being wealthy and rich, meaning we provide, we give everything. All the riches are with us. And both of these interpretations are figurative interpretations. So that's another thing that we need to bring into consideration when we're looking at these verses, because what happens in many verses is that the scholars who are looking at these verses in light of the scientific knowledge of their time, they did not interpret them literally because they said it's obvious it's not the case. So the literal meaning of this verse is we are expanding them. This is the literal meaning.
Let me just pause to talk about science and cosmology for a second. So before the 1920s, 1930s, the standard model in science in the West anyway was a static universe.
Yeah.
It always existed. This is kind of goes back to Aristotle. The universe is eternal. Yeah. The Big Bang, this idea of a universe coming into existence, a huge explosion, a Big Bang, is something that's only quite recently been discovered because of various phenomena like the cosmic background radiation and so on. So, of course, from what you're saying, if I understood you right, if the prevailing view historically over the centuries, not just in Europe, but in the Muslim world, was of a static universe that didn't expand or anything like that because it's eternal. Well, I know Muslims mostly didn't think that because the Quran says the universe is created, but they didn't have the sense of an expanding universe. So they really wouldn't have gone with this literal reading you're saying because it didn't fit with their Aristotelian science, shall we say, put it like that, which spoke of a static universe, an unchanging universe. It just existed. It wasn't doing anything other than just sitting there, so to speak. But so you're saying, are you therefore that the literal understanding of the Arabic was what was perhaps not preferred, but for other possible meanings because of that other understanding of Aristotelian science, the universe is not expanding anyway.
Yes. So it's Aristotle, but it's also everyone else. I don't think anyone in the history of mankind has advocated and won a position that the universe is expanding at every moment in time. Everyone has believed in a static universe, even though, so you could believe that the universe is eternal or created. Like, so Aristotle believes it's eternal. Muslims, Christians, Jews believes it was created, but they all believed it was static. So,
Right.
So Muslims and Christians and Jews, they believed it began to exist, but it was created there, and then it just stayed like that. And the reason why they believe that is because when you look at the universe, it looks static. You see it moving. You see the stars rising and setting in the same places, and there's a cycle throughout the year. But it's fixed, it's unchanging. It doesn't change. And so the earthly realm changes. You see lots of changes in the terrestrial world, but in the celestial world, you don't see change.
The seasons, and so on. Yeah, the four seasons. But in the celestial realm, we don't see change. It is static. So you're saying that this expanding it translation is the literal translation, which was avoided because obviously it would have been perceived to clash with Aristotelian or whatever, any other paradigm. They all believe the same thing. Cosmology, basically.
Yeah. And so and everybody's like tiptoeing around the literal, not doing the literal one. And even so, Baydawi, he does mention expansion as one interpretive possibility, but that the expansion that he mentions is not like the continual expansion right now. It means that in the past, it was expanded to this form and then it stayed static. But that, so it was raised. It was raised, it was expanded, and then it stayed and it stopped. And that's also, it goes against the literal meaning of the verse, because in the musi'un in Arabic, it's an active participle. It means the one who is doing something. And the one who is doing something in Arabic, you make sentences. You say, for example, you can say I'm standing by using the verb, or you can say I'm standing by using the active participle. You can say ana qa'im, I'm a stander, literally, but it means in Arabic I am standing. So the active participle in Arabic, its literal meaning is the present, and everybody knows that. It's just so the literal meaning of this is the present. We are expanding it right now. But even when Baydawi took the literal thing, he had to go back to the beginning, because nobody in the history of mankind has believed that it is expanding right now.
Okay, well, is this not then a knockdown argument for the scientific miracle in the Quran then? That's irrefutable. That is, because it's so impossible, given the no on the history of mankind, you put it, ever believe this, including the 7th century. Is this not a cast iron scientific miracle then?
So I think it's a very strong.
I mean, how put another way, how would a missionary or someone who wanted to have a go discredit your argument? I mean,
so they would say that you're giving a new interpretation that nobody has done before, or you're cherry picking one. And then I would say that yes, it is a new interpretation, but it's actually the literal one, and everybody's doing it figurative. And this one fits more. It's really what the language is saying. And then the missionary will not understand what I'm saying, because he doesn't understand the Arabic, and he's not going to accept it. And that's fine. I'm not
experience there. They just don't understand the Arabic. That's what you hear.
Yeah. So it's okay. Like, I don't. I guess like I feel that Muslims, they feel a need to justify themselves to other people. I don't think we should feel that need. I think like the Quran should be interpreted faithfully, and then other people, and then I think it's amazing. I think it's miraculous. I think all of these verses are miraculous.
I just want to share the clear Quran, which is another very popular English translation of the Quran, of this very verse, just to check what it's saying. So Surah 51 verse 47, we built the universe with great might, and we are certainly expanding it.
Yeah. Wow.
So basically identical translation.
Good,
Yeah.
good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad they agree with you. So. So you're saying these nuanced interpretations that you're giving, because they do require some knowledge of the Arabic, clearly indicate that Muslim apologists who claim that certain verses are scientifically miraculous, and that therefore one should convert on the basis of these verses to Islam, is not as simple as that. You seem to be making a more nuanced argument.
Yes. So I think there's two perspectives to take into account. I think the first perspective, which is where I primarily come from, is that if you are a believing Muslim and you believe that the Quran is revealed by the one who made the universe, and then you see that he's talking about the universe, then it makes sense. It makes perfect sense that he should describe the universe as it really is. And when you discover that he does, then it confirms, it strengthens your faith. It increases your conviction. Because when you look at the Bible, or you look at any other scripture, it's not like that. There's the Quran is very different. Like, it's, the more your scientific knowledge increases, you come here, you look at it, and it seems to fit. It looks like that's what it's saying. And this is, but doing it requires some Arabic knowledge. And so this is called, this is called tafsir ilmi, scientific exegesis. And this I think should be, is pretty much universally accepted. It's always been done. Like, your scientific understanding of the verses needs to inform your reading of those verses. Because like a Christian missionary will say that there's a scientific contradiction, and we'll deal with it. So if we feel that we need to deal with the scientific contradiction, then the other way around too. Like, if you see a remarkable scientific revelation, then that should also, like, if you use science, you use it. And so I think makes sense. And so that's one aspect of it. There's like an inward facing science in the Quran. And then there's like an outward facing science in the Quran, which is where someone wants to make an argument to somebody who's not a Muslim that the Quran is scientifically miraculous. And here, I think that there are I think that one, although you said like that previous verse is a knockdown verse, I think it's very strong. But I think like the argument, it becomes really strong when you look at many, many verses. So you have to see like a dozen examples.
As a cumulative case rather than simply one standalone.
Yeah. And then when you look at many, then it just it doesn't look, it gives you conviction. So so that's how I think it should be made. And it requires a linguistic argument. And if somebody doesn't understand the language, then they might not be able to appreciate it. But you can explain things in English, just as I did now. And I think that that's how that's what needs to be done.
Okay, but what about people who say that science is always changing? Because this is true. I mean, we've seen, you've admitted that for the vast history of mankind, we had a static understanding of the universe. And in the 1920s, 1930s, everything changed. And I think it was Fred Hoyle, who the British astronomer, who coined the phrase mockingly, the Big Bang. It was this sense of, you believe in it, woof, the Big Bang. It wasn't meant to be. Now it's all very serious. Oh, the Big Bang, but it actually meant to take the Mickey a little bit. It's just a Big Bang, but nevertheless, it stuck. And now we believe a universe that inflated hugely, expanded, and there is clear evidence for this. It's not just hypothesis. Mm-hmm. So there's an example of science changing. Obviously, not that the universe has changed, but our perception and understanding of it has changed. So what about people who say that science is always changing, and therefore we're hitching our interpretations of the Quran to particular verses, and we're doing a scientific exegesis, so to speak, of those verses, and that's an unstable foundation on which to interpret the Quran?
Yeah, I think it's a fair. It's important that when we use science to interpret the Quran, then it can't be on a scientific theory that's not well established. But I think, like, I mean, I'm a scientific optimist. So I think as most people do, I think that as our scientific knowledge increases, then our scientific knowledge is changing, but in general, it's improving. So with time, our scientific knowledge of the universe is getting better. But there are occasionally things that we discover, and we discover that we were wrong. But at this point in time, so right now, I think that the Big Bang I'm convinced it happened, and I think the evidence is really strong, and I believe the universe is expanding, and so it's going to affect my interpretation of the Quran, and I think this is what it means. But let's say theoretically that it changes in the future. If it changes, then we'll record another episode and we'll deal with it then. But since it hasn't,
you might then change to the old traditional exegesis, which we saw the literal reading as the least likely, given the then state of knowledge that it was static. So it's you can't lose, really, I suppose. But,
and so it's like there's many Aristotelian interpretations that are wrong, that the classical Mufassirin made, and I'm not losing my faith over that. Like, I just, like, they were mistaken. So I think that traditional Islamic scholarship is like, you look at all of the data points and you come to your own conclusion that you think is the case, and then you have a discussion, and discussions are good, because when you have discussions, when your positions are challenged, then it helps everybody. And I think, like, what I've found time and again is that whenever something's challenged, it reveals another amazing truth about the Quran, right? It reveals another amazing truth about Islam. And then just over time, like, so there's a verse in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, "Sanurihim ayatina fil afaqi wa fi anfusihim." We will show them our signs on the horizons and in themselves until it becomes clear to them that the Quran is the truth. So it's another interesting verse, because it's saying that your understanding will increase with time. And I think, like, the way that the scientific miracle used to be articulated was, it was the only reason why somebody should become Muslim, and everything hinged on it. And then something changes, and then everything comes crashing down. But I think there's many factors. Like, this is one of many factors. And
I think you're right. I think I heard a particularly unfortunate example of someone who became a Muslim because of the Gospel of Barnabas, and he read the Gospel of Barnabas. That, wow, this text is telling me that Islam is true, and so on. But the Gospel of Barnabas is a Renaissance forgery. It's not authentic. No one thinks it's authentic. There's not a scholar on the planet I've ever heard of anything is authentic. Now, he became a Muslim on the strength of that, and I thought, goodness me, do I tell him it's fake or not? And I decided I would, because he needed to ground his faith on something other than a fake text. In other words, he needed to ground it on anything other than that, like the Quran, the Sirah, faith, Unfortunately, he did make that transition to a very solid faith on reliable grounds, in the Quran and the Sunnah. Thank goodness. But it was a real dilemma. I mean, but I felt I had to, because his faith was partly false. It was based on a fake text, and so he had to know the truth. But God, thanks be to God, he did transition to a much more solid. He's still a Christian today. He's very, very solid Christian, Muslim. What am I talking about? Christian, God forgive. Muslim today, based on this fake Christian text, the Gospel of Barnabas, which I say produced in the Renaissance period, probably in Spain. This is well documented and analyzed. So in a similar way, if someone, I don't know, believed the Quran speaks of, I don't know, black holes or quantum events, I've heard some far-fetched claims, and they realized,
Yeah, there are
if
some far-fetched ones.
my faith collapses, that would be rather unfortunate and rather absurd, really, because that's not what we're called to believe in. We're called to believe in Tawheed, and that God has sent his prophets, and the final prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. So that's our faith, not some obscure interpretation of the Quran, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Gosh, okay. I'm having the last word there. It wasn't my intention. But thank you very much, Hamza Karamali. You can learn more about science and the Quran and the Bible and arguments for the existence of God by watching the God's Cosmos series, which I mentioned before, on the Basira channel, education YouTube channel, which all the links to everything that you need to watch are in the description below. Do follow this up. I must say, Shaykh Hamza, the quality of your videos is very, very good indeed. Some fantastic visuals, and because you're a scholar, the content you provide is not poor. It's usually good, very good stuff, excellent quality. That isn't always the case, unfortunately, on YouTube with other people. I mean, not you, but it is in your case. It's very, very good. So we can really benefit from your content and share it with our friends and our colleagues in beneficial ways as well. So thank you very much, Shaykh Hamza Karamali. Until next time.
Inshallah. Thank you for your kind words. Inshallah.